Okay, um, we're These Old Farts, December 11th, I think, 2014. And anybody who's been listening to the news is aware that there's an awful lot going on. And you've probably been talking around your dining room table and over the coffee and whatever. So it just seemed like a good time to start talking about some of these issues ourselves. Obviously, the Ferguson, the budget, ISIS, whatever. So, since the oldest one of these topics is really Ferguson, maybe we ought to start with that. Uh, the issue appears to be that an unarmed kid, uh, I guess, robbed a store. Must have been high or something because he was wandering down the center of the street, making a lot of noise. He was stopped by a cop who told him to get off the street. There was a fight. Um, Eventually, there was gunplay, and the young man died. Uh, at least in my mind, and I've followed this relatively closely, it's not 100% clear to me exactly what happened. There are a whole bunch of things that might have happened, depending upon who you're listening to. But I'm not 100% sure what did happen, or whether the results, the ends, if you will, justified the means. I don't know if anybody else.
Um, Actually, I thought there were two kids, because the kid he was in the store with was also with him,
Right.
and it's not clear whether he, while he was walking down the street and refusing to get off the off the street, whether the cop actually hit him with a door of his car. That was one thought. It's not clear how the fight actually started. Was it in response to being attacked by the cop, or did he just simply go after the cop? And how did he possibly reach into the cop car and reach for the gun that the cop said he did, which would have been on his right side, I would suppose. And why didn't the cop call for backup? There's all kinds of questions that I think that are that are being raised, and nobody has any answers. There are a number of people that witnessed it, and typical of witnesses, they have conflicting memories of what they actually witnessed. So it's really hard to say. But I guess the bottom line is walking down the middle of the street, because the cop didn't know that he had robbed the store when the confrontation started. Is walking down the middle of the street justification for death?
Well,
And,
I think not. And let me just say that this is a very emotional thing for me to think about, simply because I'm originally from St. Louis
Oh, dear.
and came here. And questions that I have that left me puzzled, and I still don't have an answer to it. Even when he shot the person, the idea that he left this person lying there for all the time, that really was something that bothered me. That the police did not want to bring someone there to get help and take a look at what has occurred.
Well, my understanding, and again, uh, it depends on who you're talking to,
Yeah.
was they couldn't move him until they had done the investigation, and they hadn't done the investigation. Excuse me. But
But if
Yeah.
someone is dying, do you wait until?
well, Was he
Yeah.
dead already? I mean, I don't know.
You know, we,
Mm.
And why was he shot a number of times? That seems there's a whole bunch of questions on that. My biggest issue is we don't know what happened because the policeman was not required to issue a report until a month or two later,
Yeah.
after all the information was in and he could doctor his report to fit the facts as they were reported. And I think that's a failure in the system. Whether the individual guy did the right thing or the wrong thing, we'll never know because we don't know what happened. And maybe he doesn't know what happened either. If he was truly afraid for his life, which seems to be very common nowadays, excuse me, then he could have some confused memories as well. But not requiring in an officer-involved shooting clear description. This is what happened. Let's do it right now. You have injuries. Don't get cleaned up. Don't take off all your clothes and clean them up. Let's deal with the evidence like they should theoretically be doing in any crime. So that bothers me. That the whole thing from a public relations standpoint. It's kind of too bad Barbara's not here because I'm sure she would have some strong opinions on that. Was just poorly done because they just made everything worse. They fed out tiny bits of information so that people who wanted to believe one thing could, and everybody else was screaming and yelling on the other side, so you didn't really know what was happening.
well, I think we in America needs to look at the system that we currently have, because not only did we have the event that occurred in Missouri, we had other events. How does one account for a 12-year-old child being killed simply because it looked like he had a gun? Why didn't, if you had to shoot a area that would not kill the person? So we, as Americans, need to look at the systems that we have for our police.
Right. Well, actually, there were a couple of shootings that happened after Ferguson in the St. Louis area, which I have not heard anything about after they happened. So I'm assuming that they were handled better and they were justified, I assume. I don't know. But I do remember there were at least one other, and I think two others, within a couple of weeks afterwards.
And I think we have to look at, as you say, every time there's a shooting, and what kinds of precautions are taken before the gun is fired.
Yeah.
And you talk about the 12-year-old boy sitting on a bench. Actually, he had a quote replicon, which looks like a gun, but why did the police go up to, drive up to him and then shoot him? Why didn't they stay afar and question him before? Then there's I think there was a young man, I don't know, he's probably in his late teens, early 20s, in a Walmart, had a toy gun in Walmart, and people called the police because he picked up a toy in Walmart, and police came in and shot him. And at the time he was on the telephone. He was with his girlfriend on the telephone with his mother, and so it seems that it's just too quick. These things are happening too quickly. The termination of a life is
Now,
the decision to terminate a life is too quick.
it is too quick, and one wonders if the our system is giving the police enough education on how to work and deal with multicultural citizens.
Hmm. Well, in the case of Staten Island, they already had that training. Don't use the chokehold, and then, but it was done anyway, and so it's not that they weren't trained. They were trained, and they, this, I guess this maneuver seemed to be relatively effective by the guy who did it.
I think it's beginning to sound like we're bashing the police, and I personally think that the police have a tough job,
Yeah.
and they're given a fair amount of latitude because they're given the right to carry a gun and use it when they think is a purpose necessary. I think, on the other hand, we need to be able to say they need to be held to a higher standard because we're giving them the right to do that.
I think they I think they
yeah.
expect to be held to a higher standard, and I think that for the most part, the police do a very good job. It's just a few exceptions, and we shouldn't try to protect. If there's something wrong, we shouldn't try to protect the perpetrator of it if they're out of line with what they've been taught. And
On the other hand, as you see in the cop shows all the time, they're saying, "Hey, my life depends upon this guy watching my back, and if he doesn't have confidence in me because he thinks I'm going to rat him out or something, then it puts my life on the line." And I don't think it's an easy situation to be in.
It's certainly not an easy
Yeah.
situation.
It's not really criticism of the police as much as criticisms of the system.
The system.
So you absolutely need to know how black mothers talk to their sons at a very young age and talk to them about saying yes and really try to guide them to be quiet and careful, because in the community there's the issue of black men and men getting singled out for many things.
Mhm.
And so they are told by their parents to be careful and quiet, do not fight back, and just be careful.
Yeah, I think they should be careful, but there's no requirement to be completely subservient.
Oh no! Oh
And
no!
and they should be able to talk and explain what's going on without being hassled. So yes, I believe that black women talk to their children and tell them to be smart, and but I look forward to the time that we can finally get into the 20th century, to forget about the 21st, we finally get into the 20th century where people start to think about what they're doing, and that goes for everyone. And the placard, I guess the thing that they're saying in New York City now is but I can't breathe, or Black Lives Matter also. Well, every life matters.
Right.
I don't see any distinction between anybody else. So that's that's kind of the thing that I think that everybody should be paying attention to. Everyone, we say it, in our politics, all men, meaning people, are created equal, and so every life matters as much as any other.
Yeah, and you hear this Black Lives Matter. This is what is being said now. But many years when I was coming up, we were talking about Black Power.
Mm.
And still, from Black Power to Black Lives Matter, apparently we haven't made enough of a transition to make things happen in this country.
Well, I literally just came back from Tennessee. I'd gone to one of the many places I grew up, or at least got older, let's put it that way. And there, we were looking, the place was built in 1942, 42, 43, 44. And at the time, there were a lot of black laborers, and they weren't allowed to be anywhere near where the whites were. That, you look at that, and you look today, and progress has been made. Not enough progress, I accept that, but progress has been
Yes.
made, and progress takes time.
Yes.
How long did it take the Irish to get from Irish need not to apply to becoming part of the mainstream? It didn't happen right away. And there's still leftover issues.
There are still leftover issues.
Not to the same extent as with
No.
the people of color, but there's still leftover issues. And we need to continue to progress.
I think there's also another dynamic going on, and that's the there's an upper echelon of socioeconomic, and then there's lower socioeconomic people, and each group is fighting not to be on the bottom. And instead of trying to get up, they're making sure that they try to push the other group that's closest to them down, and that way they won't be on the bottom. And that's a very frustrating thing for me to watch.
Unfortunately, it's the way things are. All you have to do is look at
Any place in the world.
at the neighborhoods in Boston. And as people came in, they went to the poorest neighborhood,
Yes.
and they built communities, and then either because they got a little wealthier and they decided to move out and there was an opportunity to move out, or something else happened, and then the next group came in. And the older group, they kept the stores, but everybody else ran because they didn't want to be involved with those people.
Yes.
And it's wrong. Every value that we try to teach, religious, political, ethical, says this is not how we're supposed to be. But on the other hand, humans are xenophobic. And as Paul pointed out, they do figure the only way that I'm going to not be on the bottom is if somebody else is there.
Now looking at what has occurred recently, how do you think that we is this country need to handle this? I, for example, say that we need to focus on giving our police more training in how to work with citizens of different background. But what else can be done to make things better?
Well, there have to be consequences to actions, good and bad. You do the job right, you're praised. You do the job wrong, you're criticized. And that's true whether it be the police, the Army, I mean, the CIA. There's always a reason why. And sometimes, if I were in that position, I might be much more sympathetic than I am sitting and watching from the sidelines. But you've got to be aware. If you do X, then bad things can happen. And if you do Y, other bad things can happen. And you gotta come up with a balance. Life isn't easy. If somebody's got a simple answer to any question, you better hope they're talking about math. Because life,
It's not. Well,
I've been trying to get that in for months now.
well, speaking of that, and looking at what has occurred with the CIA, do you, and in showing what has occurred, it's really sad. On one hand, on the other hand, I know what it felt like during 9/11, and people were this whole country was fearful.
Oh yeah.
So how does one handle that?
Well, in 24, which is obviously reality, this is the way the world really is. He's always right. He always tortures the guy who actually knows. In the CIA situation, evidently it doesn't work as well. And if you're going to go out and you're going to do all these bad things and it didn't work, then the easiest way to deal with it is to say, yeah, it did. Who's to say yes or no? What's coming out is guys like Dick Cheney, absolutely convinced that if we hadn't had all this torture, things would have been a lot worse. But other than some convoluted logic about eventually finding bin Laden because of something that somebody said 10 years before, nobody has been able to come up with one concrete example of where the torture made a difference. Sometimes they got the information before they tortured the guy, which works out real well. You can take out your aggressions, and we already have the information, so it doesn't really matter what you do.
Yeah, that was the case with the vital information they got from KSM or whatever his name is. Khalid Sheikh,
Oh, the blind sheikh who masterminded the original
I don't think he's
bombing?
blind.
There was a guy who was a blind.
He's down in Guantanamo Bay, and
Okay.
they stopped a terrorist attack in L.A.
Okay.
and from as a function of his being waterboarded a year after they stopped it.
Hey, whatever it takes.
But no, that was one of the things they said they got this information from him from waterboarding, but the incident that they stopped occurred a year before it.
Oh.
They used that as an example. Oh, we got it quite. We didn't get all our facts right, and that's what came out in the report.
Well, more than anything else, I mean, forget the fact that it's immoral and all these other bad things. What basis do we have to criticize when somebody does it to our guys? I'm a private, and I get captured in some kind of a battle, and they go out and they beat the living daylights out of me, and they torture me, and they put it on TV, and they embarrass me, et cetera, and if anybody criticizes, they say, well, you guys do it. And oh, by the way, there are people that have been tortured who A, were not accused of any crimes, and B, were cleared. And it took 5 or 6 years for us to find a way to let them go. This is...
It's not justifiable at all, and
I was listening to something in Tennessee while I was driving from Oak Ridge back to Memphis. I was listening to some guys in Nashville who were talking, and they were saying, and it sort of made sense to me, they were saying, if you knew, not if you thought, if you knew this guy had information, the 24 example, I know he's got information, I know I can save X number of lives, maybe somebody I care about personally, if I can get this guy to break, would you do it? And thinking about it in the car, I said, yeah, probably. I'd like to think I wouldn't, but I probably would. But what do you do when you don't know? When the guy responds, it gives you information, but you don't know if it's real. You don't know if it's something you told him to say. So you've done all these things and you've accomplished nothing. If anything, you've wasted time
Yeah,
because you could be out doing something else.
the report, excuse me, the report indicates that not one piece of information was gained from any of that
But
was
then-
useful.
But the CIA people claim that's not true, but they haven't given us any examples,
Mm.
unless it was the example you were talking about in L.A.
Well, they rescinded that one.
Oh, that was good.
Yeah, it's just, you know, how are human beings supposed to treat each other?
Yes.
Now, if other people are doing bad things, that doesn't give you the right to do bad things.
On the other hand, you have to protect you and yours.
You have to protect.
And the law
your-
is fairly clear that says if you do something to save a life, if you killed to save a life, that's a justified homicide. Including, by the way, if
Right.
you're in a lifeboat and the lifeboat's sinking and you have to get rid of somebody, you throw somebody overboard, that's a justifiable homicide. Because otherwise everybody dies.
Yeah, it's justifiable homicide. The only justification is why didn't you go over?
Yes.
That's
And-
always, but you're
Uh,
not required to sacrifice your life for others. You're not required. It's a good thing.
But
it's-
what right do you have to choose somebody else to to say that they are gonna be the ones to go
I
over?
mean, we are required to sacrifice lives for others. If we weren't, we wouldn't have our young men going into the military because they are sacrificing their lives for us.
Well, the
and
police
so it
is in the
means-
same situation in a
Yeah, it
sense.
means our people in Washington needs to be alert and make really the right decision in looking at all of the ways that we try to manage what is occurring. And that means we need to keep an eye on the CIA. We need to keep an eye on all the things that we have out there.
Well, you bring that up. Is Snowden justified?
Snowden?
Yeah, he
Tell us.
told everybody what these guys were doing.
I don't think that Snowden was justified because he took an oath that he would not reveal. When you get your clearance, you go through this process and you say, well, you will not divulge information that could be harmful to the United States.
Well, let's say you're Dick Cheney and you decide that,
Dick Cheney should be prosecuted.
well,
I mean, they don't call him Darth Vader for nothing.
What do they call him?
Darth Vader,
Oh,
from the Star Wars.
Star Wars, yeah.
but if you look at it, the rules are written by the people in power.
That's correct.
And they are written in many cases, you can look at the budget, which I'm sure we're going to talk about in a moment, to keep the people who are in power in power.
In power. Yeah.
So if the rest of the population doesn't understand that, doesn't see it in real terms, then effectively they have no way of reacting and trying to change things.
Yeah, but what Snowden did was not only did he reveal information, he put other lives at stake.
Yeah.
And that's, he had no right to do that. And
Has he actually revealed any undercover people? I don't remember.
I don't remember either, but when he had such a large volume of information that he did reveal, I'm sure there were things in
we
there.
know that there's a lot that he hasn't done yet because he's doing it periodically.
Now tell me a little bit more about Snowden.
Oh, he worked for the No Such Agency.
He
And-
was a contractor. He worked for somebody who was contracted by CIA,
NSA.
NSA, to do, I don't remember what it was he was supposed to do, but he had access to an awful lot of confidential information, and he smuggled it out.
And,
Would-
okay.
and
he
then-
ended up in Russia. Is that
Well,
right?
he ended up,
He ended up
running.
out of the country because he
Running.
released it.
Okay.
yeah, his attitude, and which sort of makes sense, is if he was in the country, he would not have been able to release it. They
And he
would've
would
stopped
be,
him.
and if he were in the country, he'd be in prison probably for the
Right.
rest of his life.
And accomplish nothing. If his goal was to inform the American public, he had to do it in such a way that he could, in fact, publish it without being grabbed.
And you're in agreement with his philosophy?
I don't know. It's not, as with everything else, it's not a simple yes
It's
or
not
no.
as simple, I see.
Well, to me, it's simple. He shouldn't have done it.
But some of the things that he revealed, in theory at least, were important for the American public to know and would not have known otherwise. I mean, basically we were told, no, this isn't happening, believe us. It sounds very similar to 2001.
Mm.
This is true, believe us, we know. And as more and more comes out, it turns out, yeah, they knew, but they wanted to do it anyway. So they said what they needed to say. If that be the case, going back a little further, the Pentagon Papers. There was a guy who said, we're in this is what we're doing in Vietnam, guys. Forget what you read in the paper, this is real. And was that justified? If one was justified, in theory, the other one is as well.
I don't know. I was alive at the time, but I don't really know or remember them, and I don't know what was revealed, and I don't know whether they were classified or not.
They were classified.
Yeah.
They ended up appearing in the Post and the Times, the New York Times, I think. And it was basically, this is what's actually happening in Vietnam. Forget
And-
what you're reading.
And I guess my question is, why wouldn't, probably because very few of the soldiers returned, but why wouldn't the returning soldiers be saying these things, so that everybody
Well,
would
some
know?
did. John Kerry. He went from being a war hero
Oh yeah.
to somebody that people felt perfectly justified in lying about what was going on, about what his particular place in history, because he said what people didn't want to hear. John Calley, remember Lieutenant Calley,
Yeah.
who took the fall for My Lai.
Mm.
He took the fall. The captain was there and saw what was happening. Somehow or another, he didn't.
Mm.
So a lot of this stuff did come back, but it didn't come back in a way that people learned something so they didn't do it again.
You talk about things that you'd like to know. I'd like to know who gave the order to back off on capturing Osama bin Laden when he was in the Tora Bora.
I don't know.
Because
What conspiracy theory are you espousing?
my guess is that since bin Laden family was close with the Bush family, they didn't want to see him captured and killed.
I tend to doubt it, because why would they have been going after him in the first place? Personally, I think what happened was they figured they had him on the run. Whether they got him or not wasn't important, and they needed to spend more time on the Iraq situation. So they said, okay, fine, we won. The United States has a tendency to declare victory and go on.
No, he was surrounded in Tora Bora, and they said, we'll bring back the greatest fighting force the world has ever seen, the United States Army, and let the Afghans go after him instead. Get the glory for capturing him.
That may well have been a political decision, and
And
if it had worked, it probably would have been a good one.
no, maybe, but you know the up to that point, the greatest villain of, in American history, you're gonna sublet the capture of that guy to some other group of people when you
Adolf Hitler. We decided, I think it was at Potsdam, but I'm not sure, Potsdam was after the war, in Greece or someplace. There was a big conference of all the leaders, and Roosevelt agreed that the Russians could take Berlin and have the glory of capturing Hitler. In that case, it worked. They did, in fact, take Berlin. But let's say for some reason or another, it didn't work so well and Hitler had gotten away.
So actually, we are managed by politics. Whether the politics is the best or not the best, it's the politics that
it's
go
always the politics.
Yeah, but what is politics? Politics is how people interact with each other in large groups. And yeah, we're managed by politics because what's the alternative?
The alternative is caring and being realistic and trying to do what's best for the people.
In
But that's
theory, that's
politics
what
also.
politics is all about.
That's politics also.
You think so?
Yeah.
We
Well-
don't all agree.
You know,
There are three people sitting here. I guarantee there's at least one contrary opinion on any subject you want to name.
Yeah.
How do we manage so that we can remain on the set without strangling each other? Part of it is sort of a political understanding that there's a certain way to do things. It may or may not work for everybody, but it does for the majority.
Now, as someone sitting here, I would respect what you have, and I would respect what you have, and if we are respectful of each other, then there wouldn't be all this fighting and others things going on.
There are enough things that are important that there's profound disagreements on, that without an organization and people sort of accepting somebody's going to make the decision. You know, we can argue and talk, et cetera, but ultimately somebody or some group makes a decision. And according to the democratic process, we all say, okay, fine, we'll go along with it. If we don't like it, we'll try to change it the next opportunity we have, but we'll go along with it. In American politics, on the national level at least, that's no longer true. You can look at the budgets and find out that if you win an election, it's not important because I won my election so I can do what I want. But if I win the election, you got to go along with me because I won the election.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what's happening today in the budget situation, where the Republicans finally have decided, at least Republican leadership has finally decided, that shutting down the government is probably not the world's greatest idea. But because they won the election, they want to get as much as of their stuff, even before they're in the majority, as they possibly can. And now we have.
Did they make the decision this evening to continue?
As of 5 o'clock, actually as of about 7 o'clock when I left the House, there was no vote in the House. And the bill, as it was originally negotiated, had been withdrawn.
Okay.
So it's not clear whether the government is going to be in operation tomorrow morning or not.
I was watching a show the other night, and they said, this bill in its form has to pass because there's nothing else we can do about it. And Bonnie Frank was on the show, and he said, No, that's not true. They can withdraw it, take a red pen, cross that out, and resubmit it in an hour. It's not.
It's very simple. As a matter of fact, we do it all the time. Some of the stuff that Elizabeth Warren is
Yes.
leading her crusade about was added in the middle of the night
Added to the
to the bill. The Dodd-Frank thing, which was saying, yeah, we know that the banks screwed up and almost brought down the system, but if we say, hey, you can gamble all you want to, and you can use the insurance fund that's supposed to protect the depositors to make up your losses. Now, when I go to a casino, nobody says, if you lose, don't worry about it, we'll take care of it for you. And somehow or another, that got stuck in. And then, of course, although I'm less concerned about this, the gutting of the campaign finance thing, which says, yeah, you know what?
so if
Money is speech, and
yes,
and therefore speech is absolutely protected, unless, of course, you're saying it the wrong place or the wrong thing. But if you got money, it's absolutely protected.
so if this bill doesn't pass,
Another
what do you
one.
think will be blamed for this? Elizabeth Warren's name will pop out like
Oh, yeah.
she has done something really bad.
Well, Ted
No,
Cruz's
no,
name
actually,
popped out.
actually, when it doesn't pass, Elizabeth Warren's name will pop out and say that she's done something very good, because a lot of the Republicans agree with her.
and then
And
Well,
the next election.
they don't agree with her. They agree the bill is bad
They
for
agree-
different reasons.
yeah, but right, they're not happy about funding immigration.
Right. And there's a group that, what I found interesting, I was listening this afternoon, and they were talking about what people were pissed about and why the Senate went along with some of these things. And the idea being, well, you know what, if we let this go into the new year, then there'll be a total Republican majority, and then we're gonna deal with things a lot worse. And the fact of the matter is, excuse me, they're going to have to deal with those things anyway.
Yes.
So you might as well put a stake in the ground now.
Now,
And if you lose, you're going to lose later anyway, but at least you fought.
yes, and speaking of the immigration issue, I heard the other side to the immigration issue, and this side is that many of the people who are immigrants are not applying for the current system, simply because the bill says that they would have 3 years to work under this particular system. I think.
You're talking about Obama's
Yes.
directive?
Yes.
I think the reason is that they figure that if they come out now, they've been in the shadows,
There's no
everything's been
protection
fine.
if they come out
Yes.
now.
They've come out now, and in 2 years there's a different president and a different Congress. Then, hey, you screwed up. You're gone, and I don't care what the other guy said.
Yeah.
I won the election.
Well, that's true, but let me just tell you, I heard from some of the immigrants talking one day, and I heard that some of them have been in this country 30 years, and they are not trying to make themselves known under the Obama bill simply because there's only 3 years that they have been given to.
Well, actually, in a sense, they're being foolish, because if you're a dreamer and your kid,
Yeah,
I'm a kid, and I went and I said, I'm here illegally, and the government said, that's fine, don't worry about it, don't get into trouble, and there won't be any problem. I know who the parents of those dreamers are. And if I don't, I can find out real easy. So they're already outed. They might as well take advantage.
You think so?
And I think the reason why the directive was crafted the way it was because people actually understood. They already know who you are. So you might as well take advantage of the opportunity, and it would be awfully tough for a president in 2017 to say, oh, these 5, 6, 4, whatever number of million people who came out because they were given this protection, too bad, out now. And I'm going to take the full force of the police and probably the National Guard, because 4 million people is a lot of people,
Yes.
and going to send you on your way.
So it will be good to see how the Congress and the Senate works under the new administration.
You know, works or
the
doesn't
next
work.
2 years under Obama, and then they surely thinks that they will continue.
Right.
And so it'll be interesting to see how the system will work, because right now things are not going well.
Without question, they're not
They're-
going well. And
they're not
even
going.
when they're
They're not
trying
going,
to,
yes.
when the leadership finally gets to the point where they say, okay, this is what we're going to do, guys, they can't enforce it. So, and wait till January when Harry Reid starts saying, wait a minute, guys, you can't do that, because I'm going to have a conversation until you agree not to do it. Very similar to what McConnell's been doing.
Oh, yeah.
And of
Oh,
course,
yeah.
the Republicans are going to say, you can't do that. We're the majority. We
Yeah.
decided.
Yeah.
Do you think that the new incoming Senate will try to change the Senate rules?
Yes. And by the way, the Democrats brought it on themselves
By
by changing the Senate rules.
what's,
They changed the rules too?
Yeah.
In what way?
They said you cannot filibuster a judicial, non-Supreme Court justice appointment. You have to have reasonable hearings and then take a vote.
that was the that was what's his name?
Harry Reid.
No,
Oh, the original Bork.
no. What was it? The Group of Eight that
Yeah, that was in
that they
McCain.
McCain.
Yeah. Who came up with a compromise, because the Republicans were going to do it the last time they were in charge. And Bush was the president, as a matter of fact. And McCain said, okay, we're not going to allow this to happen, but you guys got to be reasonable. So the Democrats had been doing it when they were in the minority, and the Republicans followed through and took it to a new level, because primarily in the case of the judges, because they decided the judges really make the laws. So if we don't appoint any Democratic judges until we get to be in power, then everybody will be Republican, and it doesn't matter what happens after that. We've already seen that in the Supreme Court.
yeah.
So
So-
it will be interesting.
It will be interesting, and I am hopeful that the new majority of Republicans, once they are in, will work on the system of the police, and how the system where we have too many killings going on here in this country, and how will we address that too many minority killings.
Well, I think it's even bigger than that.
I think they will do just the opposite.
What do you think?
I think they will try to reinforce the rule of law, and make. I think I see things trying to. If they do anything, they'll make it worse, because that is their penchant, is to make it worse.
Well, I think there's a bigger issue here. If you look at the fighting about the social net, there's an semi-implied, semi-spoken idea that you're poor because there's something wrong with you. And probably not a good thing. You're probably lazy or something like that. And therefore, why should everybody else take care of you if you're not willing to take care of yourself? And I don't see that changing. Nothing in the rhetoric that I've heard, either in the elections or before that for the past 8 years, or even more, has said, no, the people are poor because they're poor. And stuff happens. And if you pay somebody to send their job overseas, then they're not going to have a job. And not only aren't they going to have a job, but the guy who sells them their gas or their groceries or whatever, he's probably not going to have a job either. So until that changes, because people who are being shot right now are poor.
Yeah.
We don't hear about rich people getting shot.
No.
Black, white, gray, whatever. We don't hear about that. They're poor people. And they're poor people because...
And it's so simple. How do we help the poor people come out of the system where they are injured so badly?
I don't know that there is any way.
I think what you're saying is, and I agree with it, we have to change the mindset of the country, because the mindset of the country has just gone into the toilet, and they claim to be moral, but they do immoral things. I'm not talking about sex. I'm talking about overall ethics and morality. And until we wake up as a country, and everybody wakes up and starts to actually think about the golden rule: do unto others what you would have others do unto you. Until we actually start to think about it, I don't see us changing, and that's really important.
Yeah.
I see it as a real important thing. And
yeah, I don't disagree, but I don't see that anything's going to change, because all we have to do is bring up one example of some guy who's sitting on his porch, smoking pot, drinking cheap beer, and collecting unemployment, collecting welfare, collecting whatever.
And you can bring up that.
Right.
And so for every million of those, I will bring up one who is taking more money from the government than those million people are.
General Electric?
Not General Electric. I'm talking about even individuals. I looked at the, now I have a piece of paper that nobody can see, but I looked at the national debt as a function of time. When Jimmy Carter left office, it was $1 trillion. In 8 years, Reagan moved it from $1 trillion to $3 trillion. In 4 years, Bush 1 moved it from $3 trillion to $4.3 trillion. So
And that's with the tax increase.
And in 8 years, Clinton moved it from 4.3 to 5.9, about $200 billion a year. Then came Bush 2 with his tax cut, and he took it from 5.9 to 11.9 trillion, or an average deficit of $750 billion. And you say, well, during that time there was the war, and the war was advertised to cost about 60 billion, not 6 trillion.
Right.
So basically what's happening is $600 billion a year is being given to corporations and the top 2%. That's where the money is going. 600 billion. And that increases every year with the amount of interest we have to pay on the money, and it hasn't stopped. And it's keep going through the Obama administration because we haven't changed the tax laws. And until we do that, we are never going to get any fiscal order because we're just not collecting enough taxes.
Well, that's going back to the attitude that why should I pay taxes for some guy to sit on his front porch and smoke marijuana? If
No,
in fact,
no, that's the problem. We're borrowing the money to pay this. We're borrowing
Right.
$600 billion a year to pay these people not to pay their taxes.
by the way, do you know where we're borrowing the money from? And it's not China.
We're borrowing it from the Fed and
We're borrowing it from us.
Yeah.
You and I, through bonds treasury bonds that we buy, et cetera,
Yeah.
are in fact paying this.
You're right, but in order to buy those treasury bonds, the Fed has to create them, and so
Yeah, like any corporation, they're highly leveraged.
yeah.
Now, speaking of these poor guys sitting on the porch
Yeah.
smoking marijuana,
Right.
you've heard that many states are making marijuana legal now.
Well, we'll have to find some other bad thing for them to smoke.
Well, that's, really, Massachusetts has not at this
Well, they got
Point.
medical. Didn't they pass
for
medical marijuana?
Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
yes, for medical, but not for the poor sitting on the porch smoking marijuana.
Details.
But yeah, they quickly point out the errors that people with almost no money are making,
Right.
but people with billions are.
It's very simple. Money is speech. And the more speech you have, the more your viewpoint gets carried forward. And the poor people don't have any speech, so they're mute.
Yeah, they don't have any money, so they're mute.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, money is speech.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
But I've written to Elizabeth Warren and Barry
So it's
Sanders.
your fault.
Barry Sanders to say, do not renew the Bush tax cuts, because those are
They were made
Oh.
permanent, I think.
no.
Yeah.
Please tell me that's not
That
true.
was the deal when the upper
2000
level went to 36%, 39%?
35 from 39.
Something like that. Well, they went up for the highest level, the top 1 or 2%, and all the rest of the cuts were made permanent. That was the deal,
No,
and it was symbolic. That's
Be-
all it was.
because I'd be happy with a 35% instead of 39, and I'd be happy with a 25% corporate tax, just so long as when they make money in the United States, they pay taxes in the United States.
Yeah.
But they don't make
Yes.
money in the United States.
Yes, they
The
do.
money is, I do accounting systems. I can charge whatever I want in various stages of production.
Sure.
And I can prove that the money was not made here.
But if it's your company, then
But then you're paying taxes to France or Germany,
I-
or more likely
I don't care about
Singapore.
paying taxes to France and Germany.
Yeah.
What I care about is if you're not going to, if you're going to say I'm going to build it over there and I'll take all the profits over there, then what we should do is we should have a sales tax for those particular they can either do the sales tax or they can do,
The problem with the sales tax is that poor people like us
we'll pay it.
will pay it and the rich don't. So what do they care?
I'm talking about the sales tax of a corporation.
A corporation, yeah.
The corporate,
Those that are moving over to save
what,
taxes.
what you have is you take your sales of a corporation, all the money that's sold. If you're selling widgets and you sell 1 million widgets at $10 a piece, that's $10 million. You get to subtract the cost of goods sold. You can't subtract